Welcome back. Tuesday lunchtime. I want to look at a response to COVID-19 now. Government is again considering a basic income grant, according to the Social Development Minister, Lindiwe Zulu. Speaking during a government social cluster briefing, the minister said the COVID-19 pandemic is accelerating. Well, we know that. Joining lunchtime now, Nicoli, Nattrass, Professor of Economics at the University of Cape Town. Professor, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Not the first time that we've heard talk about the basic income grant. In fact, for the past 20 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
I'm going to suggest, though, that the urge or the urgency perhaps is greater now than ever before. But do you think government will get this right?
Well, I think it's an incredibly difficult time for the government to introduce such a grant, given that there's incredible pressure on our finances. So what I find quite strange about this announcement is really for me to take it seriously. I think I would have liked to have seen her standing alongside Tito Mboweni, for example, to explain how they think they could finance it, because that's going to be a very tricky balancing act.
Well, in terms of financing it, surely the only option they have would be to levy extra taxes.
Well, that's right. And there's been no clear documents talking about this. There's been reports of documents. And certainly there's been reports in the press about a document that I haven't seen from the ANC, which suggests that maybe we could pay for at least half of this with a tax on existing wages. In other words, the employed people will pay for this, at least half of it. So that would result in some rather interesting tensions, because one of the ways that Tito Mboweni has to balance his budget is to reduce the public sector wage bill. And then if on top of that, the taxes are also going to land on the income earners, I suspect we're going to have, a bit of a sort of distributional conflict over how that cost gets managed.
I think that's a very polite way of putting it, distributional conflict. I want to throw some numbers at you if I can, and let me test them against you. One is that by providing a 100 Rand a month universal grant per person, it could reduce South Africa's poverty rate by 76%. All of this would cost the state 197, let's call it 198 billion Rand a year. The 100 Rand, the 76%, the 197, 198 billion Rand, does that square away with what you understand?
These figures are all over the place. I've seen that amount of 197 or 200 billion tossed around, but that was in relation, I thought, to a grant of 500 Rand a month that would go to people who aren't in employment, who are not on UIF and don't already have a grant. And that would be about 33 million people, but Lindiwe Zulu has suggested maybe they'll start rolling it out in tranches, maybe to 18 to 24-year-olds and 50 to 59. I haven't seen that number in relation to the 100 Rand. It's certainly true that with a little bit of money perfectly targeted, you could actually do quite a lot to ease poverty. So for those reasons, I'm pretty much in favor of basic income. But with this particular proposal now, it's extremely unclear, precisely what that 200 billion roughly is supposed to go to and to whom.
It's that phrase perfectly targeted that you use. One of the challenges would be the capacity, I imagine, to provide this, but also to deliver it and administer it ethically.
Yes, and that the state has certainly proved itself rather wanting during the COVID epidemic. As far as I can tell, the 350 Rand a month social relief of distress grant has only actually been paid out once the whole time. So, it took a long time to get paid, and as far as I can tell, it's only been paid once. And so the state is actually struggling right now to pay out these grants. However, that said, they have gone a long way to figuring out how to use the tax information and SARS's information, etc., to try and figure out who we could pay a big to. So now we could quite easily, I think, pay a grant to somebody who isn't already in employment and who hasn't already got a grant. So I think we're moving towards that, but we haven't quite got there yet.
What's your gut feeling here? Is this just a political rhetoric to mollify South Africans, or this time around, Professor, do you think it might be a starter?
You know, my gut feeling on this is that this is just, an attempt by the Minister of Social Development to kind of distract attention from the failings within her own department. I mean, if this really was a serious attempt to meaningfully put onto the table a basic income grant, I would really have liked to have seen her standing next to Tito Mboweni. I mean, he's sitting with a budget where he's trying to reduce spending by 230 billion. And she's suggesting, well, maybe we want an extra 200 billion for her department. You know, one could just read that as politics, one department lobbying against other departments for extra money here.
Thank you for joining us. Nicoli Nattrass, Professor of Economics at the University of Cape Town.